All right, I think we'll get started. Travis, you ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning, or should I say this afternoon for people joining from the East Coast, to our webinar today on irrigation management in cherries. My name is Nicholas. I'm Director of Customer Success at Hortau, and I will be joined today by Travis, one of our irrigation management advisor in California, who's going to be telling us all about the best practices in management for cherries. So without further ado, I'll pass the mic along to Travis.
Hey, good morning, everyone. As Nick mentioned, my name is Travis Goldman. I'm the Irrigation Management Advisor for Hortau. In today's agenda, we'll be reviewing Hortau's contribution to agronomy with the introduction of our new 1K sensor into cherries. We'll be looking at the key benefits and practicality of year-round irrigation management. And at the end of the webinar, we'll be opening it up to our Q&A section. At any point in time, feel free to add a question into our Q&A and we'll make sure to address that accordingly. Hortau has been around for 19 years as a precision irrigation company founded off of soil tension. Soil tension has helped our growers with predicting, managing, and optimizing orchard conditions by accurately applying water. I'm sure everyone's familiar with our 3 pillars of agronomy, but without a strong irrigation pillar, our other 2 will falter. By optimizing our irrigation platform, we can optimize our nutritional uptake as well as mitigate pest and disease pressure. As I mentioned, precision irrigation is a year-round job. Optimizing fruit production helps this year, but as well as mitigating excessive stress throughout the entire growing season is going to help us out for the years to come. Prior to our 1K sensor, we utilized Hortau's HXM80 tensiometer that measured soil tension from 0 to 80 kilopascals. Now, this was a great product for us to use for establishing orchards as well as building well-balanced and good-sized fruit. There was some limiting factors as far as that the tension range was only to 80 kilopascals and that it had high maintenance under dry soil conditions or in years that we had to apply a deficit and we just didn't have the water to apply. Now with our new 1K tensiometer, it's a polymer-based tensiometer that has provided me and other growers with year-round transparency, and it's maintenance-free. We don't have to refill it like the old sensor. It has enhanced our accuracy from early bloom all the way until into the summer months and into the fall. And as well as it's actually redefined irrigation management in cherries, and it's really redefined how I do my job. Now, as far as with what we're doing with these 1K sensors is we're installing them strategically within the orchard at 12 inches, 24, and 36 inches. Our 12-inch sensor is there to track our feeder root and our early root water uptake. Our deeper depth at 36 inches is to track our lateral water movement and make sure that we're mitigating leaching fractions. And our 24-inch sensor is tracking that lateral water expansion through that median of that root zone. Soil tension is a direct measurement of plant water availability. The tree or plant has to overcome the physical force to remove water from the soil particle to allow it to transpire through the vascular structure of the tree and out the leaf. When water is readily available, the suction force is low and water is freely able to flow from the soil into the roots and out the vascular structure during gas exchange of photosynthesis. As far as with any type of water uptake, the suction force must be overcome for a plant to pick up any of this water. And this becomes extremely critical when we're looking at nutrition. If our nutrition is not in solution and water is not available to the plant, nutrition will be compromised and nutrition will be picked up. But under optimum growing conditions where water and oxygen are both readily available to the root zone, water is able to be picked up with the nutrition, or nutrition is able to be picked up without water and have it transpire and be moved throughout the plant for the building blocks of that plant. Once we start to apply excessive stress to the tree by having a lack of water availability and high soil tension, where that plant is no longer able to remove water from that soil particle, we start to see that the stomata start to close and that gas exchange starts to get compromised. Water deficit is going to override all other plant functions. So if we have a deficit, it's going to dramatically hurt photosynthesis. It's going to hurt the building of that, basically, of that plant. At this time too, if we're starting to apply excessive stress, it's going to start compromising our fruit quality as well as our vegetative development. And also, 1 year of stress can dramatically hurt multiple years of production. Now, soil tension can be viewed in a representation of a gradient as far as with how available water is. We know that excessive water can be a bad situation where water is readily available, but oxygen isn't. We can also look at that there's an optimum range where we consider it's the comfort zone, our blue band. There's no downtime where there's an abundance of water, but there's also an abundance of oxygen. Once the tree starts to utilize that moisture and there starts to become a depletion, we start to get to a deflection point of where water becomes a limiting factor and transpiration starts to decline. And that's where we start to pass that blue band and we start to get into a dry zone where we start to see more plant stress. And to explain this scale, what does 0 kPa look like? Well, it's absolute saturation, and we've created mud. We've completely saturated that soil profile, and we've removed all of that oxygen within that with that soil. So it's an anaerobic situation and is exactly where we do not want to be. Now, when we get into the blue band, we're starting to see, well, yes, there's readily available water. We can create a ribbon, but we're also seeing pore space. And with that adequate balance, we're improving transpiration rates, and we're also improving nutritional uptake. We just don't have any downtime. And it's where precision irrigation comes into the point of, when do we start to get outside of this comfort zone? Well, I can tell you, under excessive stress, where we start to see soil tension reach 500 kPa, yes, the soil is dark, but it has that snap. It's no longer available to that root, and it's just kind of that lingering point of where, there's just no uptake. Once we start to get past that and we get into 800 kilopascals, we can actually start to see that salts are coming out of solution and beginning to precipitate around that root zone. And you can see the little white stuff right there, it's all salt. Now, with our tensiometers, we're tracking this information in real time. So if we take this comfort zone and make sure that we start to approach it in a representation of time, we can actually start to track transpiration rates in the availability of water to a plant in real time. Under our x-axis, we have a representation of time, and under our y-axis, we have the kilopascals, where it goes from 0 in this case all the way up to 80 kPa as we zoom into that graph. The higher tension, the less the water is available. The lower the tension, the more water available, or more water is available to the plant. Under this comfort zone, or that blue band, we see optimized transpiration. Transpiration is at 100% efficiency. We see no plant stress, and we see the strong heartbeat. The way that I interpret these graphs, monitoring soil tension in real time is a lot like monitoring the heartbeat of our field. We want to make sure that we're seeing this, nice, consistent type of uptake. But if we don't, we know that we're starting to compromise the overall growth of that plant. Above and below the blue band, we also do see deflection points where transpiration is compromised because of a limiting factor of either oxygen or water. On the left and on the right-hand side of this graph, you can see that there are two vertical light blue bars. What we're doing in the field is we're measuring the in-field pressure of the irrigation system. So we're tracking when the irrigation is turned on and when it's turned off. You can see the irrigation around October 20th is ran for 9 hours and 16 minutes, and the one probably right around Halloween was ran for 19 hours and 21 minutes. We'll dive in a little bit further on what I'm looking for in these graphs to come. Now, looking at optimizing our soil tension, making sure that we have a strong heartbeat. When we're between 10 and 40 kPa for this example, we see rapid uptake. If you look at that line, it's a much more steep type of curve up. But when we're oversaturated and we're too wet, we see much lower and slower activity with that root. So to reiterate this, we've irrigated here. We've applied 9 hours and 16 minutes. Initially, the water percolates and hits our 12-inch root zone, percolates through, hits 0 kPa. As that irrigation runs, it starts to percolate through that soil profile and begin to refill our 24 and our 36-inch profile. This is what I would consider good irrigation timing. We didn't leach water. We didn't push our too deeper depths down to 0 kPa. Instead, you can see they gradually drop down and they just hit the bottom of our blue band. So they're still within that optimum range. We're not creating downtime. Now, as we start to see plant water uptake, we're seeing the tension gradually increases. This is day 1. We've got respiration at night. Day 2, respiration. And then day 3, we're outside of the blue band. So it took 2 days to go from 0 to 10 kPa, but then it actually took only 2 days to go from 10 to 40. Rapid uptake. It's exactly what we want to see as far as with optimizing our uptake. Now getting into this kind of deflection point of when do we need to reapply water? We know that water's readily available in a larger scheme of things, but we want to make sure that we're optimizing the uptake, especially in production, and making sure that we're mitigating any type of downtime there. In this graph right here, you can see that our 12-inch profile exits our blue band, and you can see that it starts to slope off and flatten out. Once it hits 80 kPa, you notice that it just decks off and it just completely flattens out. So now that cherry tree is just not picking up water at 12 inches, and it's starting to have to rely on water at 24 and 36 inches. You can see here, even at 24 and 36 inches, there's just shallower transpirational gains as we get outside of that blue band, and water's becoming less and less available to that tree. Because it was so dry, the grower decided to run an overnight irrigation, but what you can see right here is that water rapidly percolated through, hit the field capacity, and we actually started to accumulate leaching fractions because we're at 0 kPa. In reality, we could have cut that water in half, and we could have minimized that excessive downtime that we're potentially going to see later on. When you get too wet, especially at this point in time, things tend to stay wet. It's no lie that the winter that we had coming out of 2020 kind of lived up to the 2020 trends. It was very dry, and all of a sudden in late January, we finally got a rain of 3 inches, at least in the area that I am in, part of California. Some saw a little bit more, but using this soil tension data and knowing that you can go up to 1,000 kPa and see exactly where your scale is, like how dry is too dry. A big question that I had all throughout January for cherries and for almonds is to figure out, well, do we need to be irrigated in January? It's t-shirt weather. Things are dry. There's no rain in sight. In this cherry orchard right here, you can see that all throughout November, you're just seeing there's little shots of rain here that are kind of starting to like chip away at that soil moisture deficit. We have very high tension. And then finally, if we look right here, that big rain actually percolated down to 3 feet, and it percolated down, and we actually have, at that point in time, waterlogged soils. Beginning October 1st, I'm going to make sure that I have my chill portions and my chill hours set with my infield weather information. And you can see right here at this point in time, we had 1,261 chill hours in 76 chill portions. So that's something I can track in real time. And I'm going to try to prioritize fields based off of their chill portions and chill hours to break dormancy, like with Dormex. Now getting into bloom. I'm going to really make sure that my tension is above 10 kPa, but it's not exceeding 40 kPa. This flower development is using the stored energy that we built last year, and the tree is absorbing water. It doesn't really have, you can see a little bit of leaf development, but we don't have that big transpirational gain. You'll see a lot more evaporative loss within the top couple inches. The majority of it, the roots kind of hang out and they're just absorbing stuff until they can start to develop leaf. So if we excessively apply water, there's really no way to get it drawn and picked up through the roots. In this example, I'm going to show you right here, I consider this a high stress situation that plants generally do not like being excessively wet. And its representation in this graph right here, or remember, we're tracking the heartbeat of the field. How quick is that water being picked up? Well, you're coming into February, and we want to apply a little bit of fertilizer. Fertilizer gets put on, and, you know, it's not really getting utilized. We don't have a lot of leaf. And then we get a rain. Well, there we go. We cause a leaching fraction there. And then, you know what? We need to apply a little bit of a fertilizer there. So they quick run. We know it's wet, so they try to run a little quick run right there. And you can see within a half of a day, it's already hitting 24 and 36 inches. Water seeks the path of least resistance. And if your soils are waterlogged, waters are going to rapidly percolate through. If we look at what I would consider regulated stress, it's a little wet at 3 feet, but you can see your 12-inch root zone is going through root water absorption. It's just slowly chipping away at that water. And then you can see your 24-inch root zone. We're actually seeing activity, not at 1 feet, but at 2 feet. We have 24 inches of root activity going on with this orchard and rapidly picking stuff up. With this orchard this year, I saw a lot more uniform bloom. I had a heavier bloom. It just was, you know, there weren't any bad areas of it. Now that high stress side, the areas that got too wet, you know, there's a couple blooms here, a couple blooms there. You know, the dry side of the field, well, that thing's in full bloom. I saw a lot of staggeredness within bloom and kind of waking up. And I really correlate that with the orchard being too wet. Now, if you can see, both of these are relatively close to that 10 kPa range. So like, how wet is too wet? Like, we know, you know, these trees don't have a lot of leaf and they're trying to put stuff on, but, you know, okay, well, if we look at this, this is at 10 to 12 kPa and we can see pore space. You know, I can create a ribbon. It's very easy. But if I look at the high stress where it's just anaerobic, got mud. And this is a big defining factor, especially for early development in cherries. You need to make sure that you have that balance of water and oxygen without getting too wet and losing your fertilizer. Moving into early cell division and early leaf development, I'm making sure that my frost alarms are still on, so that in-field weather data that I have for my chill portions and chill hours, all the way from bloom until I get the fruit out of the field, I'm going to make sure I have my frost alarms on. It's either going to send me a text, it's going to send me a phone call, or it's going to send me an email, just a log to make sure, you know, what was our temp. At this point in time, I'm beginning to push my fertility program, but not to the point where I'm going to start causing anaerobic soil conditions. I'm trying to maximize my fertility uptake and make sure that I'm between 10 and 40 kPa. You know, I have to reiterate, you've got to get fertilizer on, but creating hypoxic soil conditions do not help out with fertilizer uptake. Getting back into that orchard, that, you know, little chip shots, spoon feed, you know, type of spoon-fed type of irrigations, they're trying to help out with, they saw a little bit of crusting, therefore they applied a little bit of water. You know, 5 hours, 6 hours of water, that's nothing. When you look at your weekly ETO, you look at, there's a little bit of crusting, but if it's not being picked up because the orchard is behind, because it has delayed development, you really need to scale back and pull the reins back on these applications. And you can see right here, you know, it's completely full. and they run a little 6-hour shot, and then, you know, percolates all the way down to 3 feet, and you're seeing just this kind of compromised activity. And guess what? It rains. Guess where all my fertilizer's going? So that fertilizer that I applied 2 days ago, that is now pushing into the 2-foot root zone. So it's out of the feeder roots at 12 inches. It's gone. So all of that fibrous activity that I have with roots and just that weed mat of root that I have at 12 inches that cherries have, just flushed it all out. With this regulated stress, this grower came in and actually toe rigged things on and applied some micronutrients through a foliar application. I don't know exactly what they ran on the foliar, but they went through and they put a toe rig through because they knew that it was going to rain. It's within 30 kPa, and they knew, you know, it did get wet, but at the same time, they weren't going to inject, have the thing absolutely saturated, and then get hit with more rain. It's just, it's at this point in time, you know, if you're going to get a little bit of rain, it's better to be a little bit dry and then come back with a little bit of water to make sure that you can water in that fertilizer versus being excessively wet and then getting stuck in a situation with too much rain. Through early fruit development, and so we start to get into you know, the whole overall development of that fruit. I'm still trying to make sure that my target soil tension is between 10 and 40 kPa. Still mitigating anaerobic soil conditions, as well as this time I've got leaf. These trees are building, they're putting on a lot of water into building fruit, to building leaf, they're transpiring. And I need to make sure that I'm not causing excessive stress. I'm not too dry. We talked about being too wet, but now we're getting to, well, don't be behind, especially if you've got a heavy crop, you got to make sure you're on top of it. Now, looking at this, we have high stress versus regulated stress. Things happen with orchards. You've got to spray them. You've got to do things that could basically delay, you know, an application of water. In this situation on the high stress, I've got it categorized. We've got one right after the irrigation. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Within 4.5 days, that top 12 inches is becoming depleted because it's building fruit. We get to day 5, and then we get to day 6, and then we get to day 7, and then we get to day 8. Well, they had to apply they had to go spray, and they were worried about a rain, so they came in. It didn't rain that much, came through. This is last year, and then hit it with a little bit of, you know, a little bit of water. Well, this is great, but at the same time, it wasn't enough water to kind of fully recover that profile, and it only bought us 2 days. Heavy crop, it's going to require a lot of water. If we go over to our regulated stress, we can see that the 36-inch profile is just slowly, gradually increasing, which is great. And we're seeing rapid water uptake at 12 inches. And you can see these big heartbeats, the big transpirational gains every single day. Same thing within 5 days. Day 6, they come in with a short little 7-hour set. Comes in, 1, 2, 3. Didn't expect that. They put a little 10-hour shot. And what we're seeing is that we're seeing rapid uptake. That means rapid fertilizer uptake. We see rapid sizing. We're seeing a lot of things progressing within this orchard because of precision irrigation and coming back with trying to prioritize water and getting it on when we need it. As far as for fruit sizing, if you're having fruit sizing issues at this point in time, it could be because you're too wet and you're minimizing the ability for the tree to transpire and pick up that water, or you're starting to run a little too dry. Your best fruit size is going to happen between 10 and 40 kPa. Looking at this, we have a lot more mature leaf. We're building, building fruit. You're seeing these bigger, rapid gains. In a light crop situation, you'll see kind of a slower uptake. It's not utilizing as much water to fill fruit compared to a heavy crop. If we look over here, if you look at that 12-inch profile, 1, 2, 3, but you can see it's rapidly reaching for that water to pick up and put it places. It's putting it into the fruit. With this, waiting till it gets to 40 kPa, and then hitting it. And the reason why they're waiting until it's 40 kPa is to get through irrigation sets, as well as to maximize sugar buildup. In the example of the light crop, you're going to apply water a lot differently. You're going to wait for that water uptake at 12 inches before kind of hitting it with these applications. Now, as far as for finishing fruit, we want to make sure that we're keeping our tension above 10. Once we start to get below 10 kPa, we start to see soft fruit. We see good size, but it's not going to be firm, as well as you won't have necessarily that consolidation of sugars and have that quality. If you do have fruit sizing issues, I'm not going to wait until it gets to 40 kPa. I'm actually going to start irrigating between 10 and 25. Now, if I have good size, I'm not worried about my grading. I'm going to hit it between 10 and 40 kPa, and I'm going to try to pick as I get to 40 kPa to make sure that I'm not going to have bruising issues. I'm going to have that firmness. I'm going to have the, everything that you need as far as for fruit. Now, looking at these two graphs, we have a high stress situation versus a regulated stress situation. As I mentioned previously, we're measuring infield pressure. So if you don't have enough pressure and your irrigation system turns on, say, for instance, this one ran at 4 psi through double line drip, you see, yeah, it's going to leak out, but it's not going to cause that trigger. And it's going to cause a huge issue with uniformity within that orchard. Because it was a low pressure irrigation and it didn't get enough water on, you can see that it didn't laterally expand out and it didn't actually recover a lot of that profile. Getting closer to harvest, you can see leaf curl. Fruit weight will probably be just fine. It's going to be, you might run into some issues with the fruit, especially if it gets really hot. But if you look at the regulated stress side, firm fruit, the canopy looks great, but we're still waiting for that fruit to get to 40 kPa, that 30 to 40 kPa range before we start to pick to make sure we don't have bruising issues. Now, with our 1K sensor, it's really to redefine how I'm able to do my job. The previous sensor only went up to 80 kilopascals, and it didn't necessarily provide me with the tool to help out with regulated deficit irrigation, mitigating wood, shortening internodes, making sure that I'm not causing too much of a vegetative growth through these summer months. I'm going to have to cut off and I'm going to have to hedge. It's just costing you money, and it's hurting the overall health of the orchard. By making sure that we're cycling the orchard through this 10 to 190 kPa range, we're starting to shorten our internodes and we're not getting tons of growth out of our tops, but it's not causing excessive stress. And this is where it's really helping me out with hone in on cherries. Now, if I need to prune, working with guys that are coming in with the equipment, you're getting better lignification of that growth, as well as reducing the amount of water within your vascular cannula layer once you get above 200, that 200 to 300 kPa range, where you get clean cuts and it's not going to cause a ton of issues with your orchard, as well as when you have to come through and you have to put the chipper through and get rid of all of your pruning, your cuttings. You're not going to cause compaction issues. So that hedger is not going to cause rutting. When you're above 200 kPa, you're going to get cleaner cuts, and you're not going to, it's going to be quick turnaround time. They're not going to get stuck. Looking at stress in the summer, you can't treat every field the same. If a field becomes excessively dry, you have to combat it with the proper amount of water, as well as if you see an orchard that is just utilizing water a lot slower. Remember, we're tracking the transpiration rate with soil tension. If it's slow to pick it up, then yeah, it takes 2 weeks. If it's hot, but water is still available, well, let's not cause more stress by getting those trees too wet during the summer months and mitigating their ability to pick up water. As well as on this high stress side, if we start to consolidate salts at 3 feet, if you look at that 3 foot root zone, we're getting into that 600 to 800 kPa range. where salts are now coming out of solution, we're going to start to see salt damage within the canopy itself. Now, as far as with making these decisions on regulated deficit irrigation, I'm also using our NDVI tool, which is measuring photosynthesis. And through this, we have a scale right here. As you can see, we've got everything from low to high photosynthesis, and it's a scale of green to yellow to red. Using this layer and using soil tension to compare notes and assess, is it dry? Do I see something in the canopy? What's going on? If you see that high tension side where I told you that there was a consolidation of salts at 3 feet, you can see in the canopy we started to see leaf fall, and we're starting to see browning. Well, we have NDVI to track and show that we're causing too much stress. In this situation, I would need to come in, I would need to apply more water to help out with reducing the stress. Now the regulated side, I'm still seeing decent photosynthesis. You're starting to see a little bit of yellowing in the NDVI, so it means I am applying a deficit. I'm also mitigating leaf fall, but I also don't have a ton of vegetative growth on the tops. For my fall management, I'm going to scale back down to that 10 to 40 kPa range. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to optimize my time within that blue band to help out with carbohydrate sequestration in the building blocks for next year's crop. In the September to October months before it goes dormant, it's not the time to check out. Applying water once a week, giving them 12 hours. If it's not enough, you need to come through and you need to apply that more water to rehydrate that profile and get those trees back online. What you'll start to see, the trees that go through those summer months with too much stress, and then you start applying water during carbohydrate sequestration, they start re-blooming and pushing new vegetative growth. So instead of storing energy, they're now utilizing that energy, which could have been used for next year. For this regulated side, it's just spoon-fed with these shorter applications of water because it didn't get compromised in the middle of summer. It's easy to rehydrate, and we're hitting them with these shorter shots. And as the days get shorter, we're probably going to be extending the time between these irrigation events. Instead of going every 3 days, we'll go every 4 days, then maybe possibly every 5 days until the tree goes dormant. But for both applications, we don't want to put these trees to bed wet, making sure that we're between that 10 to 40 kPa range. Looking at 2021, we've seen dry soil conditions, especially from the winter. We're going to probably get some more rain, but I've seen early applications of water, and I'm already seeing a higher irrigation demand. I'm also worried about my water quality because a lot of my water allocations have been pulled back, and we're using more well water. At this point in time, I need to make sure that I'm keeping those salts in solution and that I'm minimizing stress in the summer months below 600 kPa because I'm going to start consolidating salts in the root zone. I think the biggest thing that's going to come from 2021, it's a mandatory high water use efficiency year. And the only way I'm going to do that is with precision irrigation and know exactly when I need to apply water. I need to eliminate leaching fractions. I need to know when I'm getting below 10 kPa and adjusting my times. Do I need to add an hour? Do I need to reduce an hour? You have to be that precise. As well as timing regulated deficit irrigation, not just going into the summer months and applying 8 to 12 hours or 24 hours based off of a weekly schedule. It gets water every Monday. It's timing, making sure that I'm not getting an orchard too wet or too dry, as well as optimizing spring management, making sure that I'm building fruit, making sure that I have adequate uptime and that I'm not applying extra water that does have salt. And going into that high water use efficiency, if I can use less water and have a better crop and have better trees, I'm putting on less soluble solids. And in conclusion, equal applications of water do not mean equal results. Make sure that you're managing each field accordingly.
Good. Thanks, Travis. That was super insightful as usual. So we're going to move into the questions section. We did receive a few questions, so I'm going to go ahead and read them off to you, cool. I guess. So we got a question from Tom asking, what do I do if I need to apply fertilizer, but the field says it's wet?
So there's a couple things that you can do. As I mentioned, I have a grower that was trailering on that application, and then they were going to set it with a little bit of like a light irrigation, or if there was rain in the forecast to get that material. A thing to look at, we look at a fertility program more like a calendar of I've got to get it on in strategic timing for the development. But if the tree is too wet and it's not picking up that water, it's not going to be picking up that nutrition. So waiting a couple of days for your fertility program could result in much more different results. I would try to make sure that if you have to apply it through a fertigation, that you're minimizing the amount of water, but maximizing the uniformity of it. So get the system up to pressure, inject your material, run a little bit of clean water, get it to set in, and just be done with it. But I think, and it's something, especially if you have a question this year, feel free to, I've got my information just to the left. Feel free to send me an email or give me a phone call. I'd be more than happy to go over your graph or go over your field to kind of come up with a plan.
Perfect. Good. We got another question here from Heidi asking, so with low water quality this year, do you have any recommendations?
And that recommendation is high water use efficiency. So on the west side, I have wells that have high salts, high boron. The way that I can help out this orchard, hopefully next year is going to be a better water year. Hopefully we get more rain. I don't want to be applying too much water, which is going to start applying more of these salts. So having a high water use efficiency, if I can cut out, and let's say out of a 1 month period, if I can cut, a 10% out of my irrigation, well, you look at that, that's 10% less salts that are being applied. And look at it that way. I think another thing too is looking at it the summer month, making sure that you're keeping those salts in solution. So you might have to be running more water, but keeping them in solution until we can get potentially to the next rain event or until the trees go dormant. Same thing, when we run into that, please feel free to reach out to me via email or phone.
Good. And I believe we have one more question here from James. Do you have any preferences between drip irrigation system and micro sprinklers for cherries specifically?
I love that question. My answer is both. So as far as what I'm recommending on cherries is that if you can do it, I would put in a dual system. The reason being is that I like running my fertility program through my drip and keeping it close to the tree, and then sizing fruit with either a full coverage system or a micro sprinkler. But then going into my summer months and using just the drip. Until I need to, incorporate a herbicide, I can turn on the full coverage system. But you get the benefits of both. The micros can get ran for frost as well as for fruit sizing. But I can optimize my fertility program with the drip, and I can optimize my deficit irrigation in the summer by just irrigating where the trees are and not irrigating in the centers.
Perfect. Well, I think that summarizes all the questions we got for today. And I think that's going to wrap up our webinar for today as well. So Travis, I want to thank you for joining us today. And that was great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. I'll catch you guys later.